Today on Secrets of an Almost Chef, we're going to talk about a subject that is very sensitive for some people, and that subject is baking. I know some of you love it, some of you absolutely hate it. I hear stories from friends and family members who are like, I hate baking. I hate the mess. I hate the cleanup. I hate that my cookies or my cakes never turn out. But today, I am about to change your baking world because I am going to teach you my top 10 baking secrets. So, first, you guys, the most important tip that I can possibly teach you today is you have to make sure your oven is properly calibrated. So if a recipe calls for the cookies to be baked at 350 degrees and your oven is not calibrated properly, your cookies are never going to bake. So you're going to invest, and that was the first tip. The second tip is you're going to invest in an oven thermometer, okay? And I'm gonna take you guys over to the oven and show you how this works. So we're gonna preheat our oven to 375 degrees because that's what the world's most famous chocolate chip cookies bake at. Now, you're gonna take your oven thermometer. The third tip is always make sure that your rack is placed in the center of your oven unless otherwise stated in the recipe. You're gonna place your oven thermometer right in the center of your oven and you're gonna close the door. Now, the reason why this is so important, and I actually learned this from my oven guy. Once your oven is preheated and it beeps, that means that the walls of your oven are preheated, but that does not mean that the center of your oven is to the temperature that it needs to be at. So today I'm actually going to show this to you guys, that as soon as the buzzer goes off, we're going to come back to the oven, and I'm going to show you that my thermometer isn't going to be to 375 yet. Okay guys, so our timer has just gone off. Right here it says it's preheated to 375 degrees. Now, if you've ever had struggles with your baked goods not turning out, this could be your culprit. So if you come down here, I'm gonna open the oven door really quickly so that we can see what our oven is actually preheated to. So if you guys look here, we are only at 300 degrees. This is a huge difference. 75 degrees is a huge difference. So be absolutely sure, and this is tip number 4, be absolutely sure that you wait. Sometimes it takes my oven at least 5 to 6 more minutes after my timer beeps to get to the point it needs to be at. It's been a whopping 10 minutes. Come back down here. Oven is finally preheated to 375. Tip number 5, the color of your pan greatly influences the outcome of your baked goods. So if you see here, a lighter pan, I just want you to think, is going to absorb less heat. A darker pan is going to absorb more heat. So if you're making cookies and they're constantly burning or they're super duper crispy on the bottom, are you baking with a dark pan? That could be why. Always bake with a light pan when you're making cookies, cakes, and things of that nature. Now, if I'm roasting vegetables and I want an amazing char on my vegetables, I'm gonna pull out my dark pan because remember, dark pan is gonna absorb more heat. So, just remember that one little secret, and that will also help you in your baking success. Tip number 6, parchment paper is a baker's best friend. The reason I love parchment paper so much is first, the obvious reason, cleanup is a breeze. Nothing is gonna stick to your pans. But even more important than those two things is parchment paper is gonna almost act as a buffer between the heat of your pan and the cookie itself. So I love parchment paper because it helps promote even baking. I almost always use parchment paper. It also is amazing, like if you're making a cake If you line it first with parchment paper and you go to dump your cake out, that cake is gonna come out perfectly because you have your parchment paper down at the bottom. My very last favorite hack with parchment paper is making my own muffin liners. You guys know the ones you pay like $4.99 at Michael's for? You're just gonna take a 5x5 square of parchment paper. You're gonna stick it right here over your muffin tin. Get your favorite IKEA cup. And boom, you got yourself a perfect little muffin liner. Tip number 7. Sometimes, if we haven't been using parchment paper, which I am guilty of on occasion, you can get yucky, grimy, gross things on your edges and dark spots on your pans. This is not good for baking because then, depending on where that dark spot is, wherever your cookie or your cake is, will actually cook a little more unevenly. So, I have 3 words for you guys. Barkeeper's friend. It is going to get all of those yucky stains off. It's gonna clean your pans better than any Dawn dish soap ever would. Tip number 8. Another huge culprit of cakes that don't rise or cookies that fall flat is your baking soda or your baking powder have expired and they are no bueno. So I'm gonna show you guys how you know for sure if your baking powder and baking soda is still good. So I have here just a little bit of nice hot water, and I'm just gonna put in some baking powder. Now, if your baking powder fizzles and foams, you're good. So we're just gonna kind of sprinkle this on the hot water, and you can see we have activation. Our baking powder's good. So for baking soda, you do have to use vinegar. You can't just use hot water. So I'm just gonna pour a little bit of vinegar in my cup. I'm gonna take baking soda. Again, we wanna make sure that we're seeing the sizzle. And voila, we have magic. It's sizzling. So our baking soda and our baking powder are good. Please make sure you do this test if your cookies don't rise or something happens to your cakes. Tip number 9, invest in a really good kitchen scale. Now, I know some of you may be saying, I don't bake often enough to buy a kitchen scale. I promise you, having a kitchen scale in your kitchen is going to be one of your favorite tools. There are 2 ways to scoop your flour into your measuring cup. So the first way, and the way that I actually use the most often, is I come in my container and I kind of fluff my flour first so it's not super packed in there. And then I just do a really gentle scoop like this. And then you're gonna just kind of tap it in there. And then we're gonna put it in our kitchen scale. Now, if we look at the ounces, we're at 4.34 ounces. The second way you can do this is by putting flour in with a spoon, okay? And then taking your knife and taking it off. Now, if you guys watch carefully, I'm going to zero out my scale again, and we're gonna see how many ounces of flour this is. So if you can see, this is 5 ounces. Now, I know that may not seem like a lot, but when you're baking, those little increments can actually make a really big difference in your cookie being too dry or too wet. So you can use these 2 methods for measuring your flour, but just know that I always recommend using a kitchen scale. Our very final tip, tip number 10, and probably one of the most important tips, I cannot stress this enough, is having all of your ingredients at room temperature. Now, there is a great debate. What is room temperature butter? Some people think it means that it's melty and soft and you throw it in. No, that is not room temperature butter. I'm gonna show you guys right now what room temperature butter looks like, okay? So when you get your butter, I just want you to watch the way it pulls away from the wrapper, okay? Can you see that there's nothing is sticking to the wrapper, no butter. This is how you know it's literally perfect. Now, if you take your finger, okay, and you place an indent, I want you to see how it's not so soft that it's just like, you know, just completely pushes into the butter. There's still firmness to that butter, okay? So this is how you know your butter is ready. Now, if you're geeky, like I am, I will use my Thermopop, okay? And I just stick it right into my butter. And typically you want it at 65 degrees. So if we look, guys, I did not plan this ahead of time. It's literally 65 degrees. This is how you know you have perfect room temperature butter, okay? Also, this means room temperature eggs. I set my eggs out a couple hours ago. Now, some of you may not have time for a couple hours. That's totally fine. Just put them in a bowl of hot water really quick. So there you guys have it. My top 10 best baking secrets. Thank you so much for watching Secrets of an Almost Chef today. Please, please, please share this video, like it, subscribe to my channel. I want to continue sharing with you guys all of my secrets and the things that have helped me become the kind of cook that I am today with all of you. Have an awesome day.